Introduction. Hidden in the shadows of history are inventions so advanced, they were erased from all records. Devices that could defy gravity, harness limitless energy, or manipulate the very fabric of reality. Today, we uncover forbidden technologies the world was never meant to see. Stay with us as we reveal the secrets lost to time. The Nazi Bell. In the closing years of the Second World War, deep in the mountains of Lower Silesia, German researchers worked on a device that would later become one of the most enduring technological mysteries of the era. They called it Die Glocke, the bell. At first glance, it appeared to be a large, metallic object shaped like an industrial container, covered with thick ceramic plates and reinforced steel ribs. Yet its purpose was far from ordinary. According to surviving technical notes and reports compiled after the war, the machine was part of a classified research program focused on high-energy physics, gravitational anomalies, and biological effects of radiation. The device stood several meters tall and required a specialized underground chamber for operation. Inside the chamber, heavy power cables, coolant pipes, and lead shielding formed a network around the structure. At its core was a material referred to as Zerum 525, a violet glowing metallic substance suspended in cylindrical flasks. During activation, the substance was rotated at high velocity by a system of counter-rotating drums, creating a vortex of intense electromagnetic energy. Researchers reported that the surrounding air thickened, the temperature dropped, and nearby objects began to distort visually as if viewed through a layer of rippling water. The bell was not designed in isolation. It was part of a larger research initiative that spanned several underground facilities, each focused on experimental physics that had little connection to conventional military needs. Scientists involved in the work noted unusual effects: the decay of organic samples, rapid dehydration of plant matter, and disruptions in time perception among personnel during extended tests. Some records describe how watches stopped working or ran at inconsistent rates when brought near the device's containment structure. Despite its enigmatic nature, the machine was developed with the precision of wartime engineering. The ceramic armor that encased it served as protection against extreme radiation and electromagnetic pulses. Found documents suggest that several accidents occurred during the early phases of testing, leading to fatalities among researchers. These incidents were classified immediately, and access to the test chambers was limited to a small circle of personnel with the highest security clearance. As the war neared its end, the project's urgency intensified. Equipment was dismantled, crates were sealed, and transport orders were issued under the highest secrecy. Eyewitness accounts from the region describe convoys leaving the facility at night, guarded by SS units and moving toward an unknown destination. In the confusion of the collapsing front, both the records and the device itself vanished. When Allied intelligence teams arrived at the site, they found only empty halls, traces of removed machinery, and a few abandoned documents containing fragmented diagrams of the bell. Investigators pieced together what they could. Engineers concluded that the unusual construction and materials pointed toward experiments in high-intensity electromagnetic propulsion or field manipulation. Physicists noted that the device's internal configuration resembled early concepts of particle accelerators, though its purpose could not be fully understood without the missing components. Radiation signatures in the chambers confirmed that a powerful energy source had been used, one far beyond the scale of typical wartime technologies. Over the decades that followed, Die Glocke became a symbol of lost knowledge and suppressed scientific ambition. Testimonies from captured engineers, declassified intelligence files, and the architectural remains of the facility all aligned to create a portrait of a machine designed to explore the boundaries between energy, matter, and gravitational fields. Although no physical trace of the bell has ever been recovered, the consistency of the surviving descriptions suggests that it was not a mere legend but a real, highly advanced experimental device. Today, the story of Die Glocke stands as one of the most compelling technological enigmas of the 20th century. It represents a moment when scientific research crossed the threshold into unexplored territory, producing effects that even its creators struggled to understand. The disappearance of the device ensured that its principles would never be fully deciphered, leaving behind only fragments and unanswered lines in historical reports. What remains is a silent legacy, a machine whose purpose was never publicly revealed, and whose influence lingers only through the traces it left in abandoned laboratories and classified wartime archives. The Kelly Space Drive. In the early 1970s, a quiet but determined engineer named James P. Kelly began constructing a propulsion system that challenged the conventional laws of motion. The device, later referred to as the Kelly Space Drive, was introduced not through grand announcements or institutional backing, but through a series of small demonstrations shown to a handful of colleagues and independent researchers. What drew attention was not the machine's appearance. It resembled an array of metal plates, capacitors, and electromagnetic coils, but the fact that it appeared to generate thrust without expelling any fuel. The drive operated on a principle Kelly described as asymmetric electromagnetic displacement. He claimed that, by pulsing electrical currents in precisely timed sequences, the device created directional forces that did not require the reaction mass expected in traditional propulsion. Observers noted that, during activation, the machine emitted a low hum, followed by a subtle but undeniably measurable forward movement. The effect was small, yet consistent, and completely independent of airflow or mechanical contact with the testing surface. Kelly maintained that the system interacted with the fabric of space itself, producing microscopic distortions that translated into macroscopic force. He proposed that space was not empty but filled with a structured field that could be manipulated through high-frequency electromagnetic harmonics. By tuning the device to certain resonance states, it could exert pressure against this medium, resulting in thrust without combustion, propellers, or jets. Such claims drew skepticism from academic physicists, but the demonstrations continued. A series of tests reportedly showed that the drive functioned in vacuum conditions, eliminating the possibility of ion wind or thermal expansion as the source of movement. The machine performed best when housed within a frame that isolated it from vibrations, allowing small displacements to become more noticeable. Measurements taken by technicians indicated thrust values that, while modest, exceeded any known experimental noise or measurement error. The growing attention soon reached organizations with deeper resources and greater interest in unconventional propulsion. Kelly was approached by representatives who described themselves as intermediaries for national research groups. They expressed interest in acquiring the prototype, reviewing his notes, and potentially funding further development. According to those familiar with the timeline, Kelly agreed to several closed-door meetings in which the device's internal mechanisms, wiring layout, and control circuitry were examined. After these meetings, Kelly's public work slowed noticeably. The few individuals who maintained contact with him described a man who had become increasingly cautious, often mentioning that he had signed documents preventing him from discussing certain details of the technology. Within months, the demonstrations ceased entirely. His workshop was emptied, and the prototypes that had once been displayed on wooden tables were no longer seen. When researchers attempted to track the project, they found that patent applications associated with Kelly's work had either been withdrawn or reclassified. Documentation that had circulated informally among engineering circles vanished from the usual archives. The drive, once observed in operation by multiple witnesses, faded from public awareness. Only fragments of schematics, copies of hand-drawn diagrams, and brief technical summaries remained in circulation. Despite the disappearance of the device, the idea behind the Kelly Space Drive left a lingering impression. The notion of field-based propulsion, creating motion through controlled interaction with space itself, continued to influence fringe research groups and independent physicists. Some believed that the project had been absorbed into classified aerospace studies. Others thought it had been dismissed after further testing. No official explanation ever emerged. The Kelly Space Drive occupies a unique place among forbidden inventions. It was neither a myth born from rumor nor a massive industrial project hidden behind concrete bunkers. Instead, it was the creation of a single engineer whose quiet persistence produced something that defied conventional understanding. Its disappearance ensured that its inner workings were never fully examined, leaving behind a technological outline without a core. Today, the surviving traces of the Kelly Space Drive remain as a reminder of a propulsion concept that briefly emerged, demonstrated measurable effects, and then was removed from the public sphere. The absence of the original prototype leaves the story suspended between innovation and silence, preserved only in the accounts of those who witnessed its short-lived period of operation. The ferrofluid gravity engine. In the late 1960s, a reclusive mechanical designer known simply as M. Reinhardt began presenting curious demonstrations to a small circle of engineers in Northern Europe. His invention did not resemble a traditional engine. It consisted of a transparent cylindrical chamber filled with a dark, shimmering liquid that responded instantly to magnetic fields. This substance was a custom-engineered ferrofluid, unusually dense and capable of forming geometric structures when exposed to precise electromagnetic pulses. Reinhardt referred to his creation as the ferrofluid gravity engine, though its operation appeared to involve far more than fluid dynamics. At the core of the device was a rotating magnetic lattice, a circular frame embedded with coils arranged in a pattern designed to shift polarity in microsecond intervals. As the coils activated, the ferrofluid responded by rising, twisting, and forming spiraling columns that pressed against the chamber walls. Observers noted that the movement of the liquid created a visible distortion of the surrounding air, a faint ripple effect that resembled heat haze but appeared even at low temperatures. Moments later, the entire assembly would lift slightly, reducing its apparent weight on the supporting scale. The effect was small but consistent. When the magnetic pulses were synchronized with the rotational motion of the lattice, the engine exhibited what Reinhardt described as gravitational offset. Instruments showed fluctuations in local weight distribution, suggesting an interaction with the inertial properties of the device. Unlike conventional propulsion systems, no exhaust, combustion, or mechanical contact contributed to the motion. The only active components were the ferrofluid and the shifting magnetic fields that shaped it. Reinhardt insisted that the key lay in the fluid's internal structure. He had engineered the suspended particles to respond to harmonic frequencies far beyond the range used in ordinary ferrofluids. When subjected to the lattice's magnetic pattern, the particles arranged themselves into vortex-like forms that rotated independently of the chamber. These fluid vortices appeared to produce localized distortions that affected the engine's stability and weight. Some technicians who viewed the demonstration claimed that loose metal objects near the device vibrated subtly during operation, as if sensing the changes in magnetic or gravitational fields. When Reinhardt attempted to scale the prototype, he constructed a larger version with reinforced magnetic coils and a more complex fluid mixture. During one test, witnesses observed that the engine nearly lifted off its platform before abruptly shutting down. The sudden power loss created a shockwave that cracked nearby glassware and left the ferrofluid inside frozen in a crystalline pattern. Reinhardt examined the chamber afterward and remarked that the internal structure of the fluid had shifted into an unknown phase, something he had not seen in previous experiments. News of the project soon attracted the attention of organizations interested in emerging energy technologies. Representatives visited Reinhardt's lab, inspected the prototypes, and reviewed his notes. Within weeks, the atmosphere around the workshop changed. Reinhardt stopped discussing the details of his research openly. Visitors who attempted to schedule follow-up demonstrations were turned away. He explained that he was no longer allowed to present the engine publicly and that further development would occur under restricted conditions. The workshop closed shortly afterward. Neighbors reported that several large crates were removed at night by unmarked vehicles. Reinhardt relocated, leaving no forwarding address, and the original prototypes were never seen again. When researchers searched for patents or technical papers associated with the ferrofluid gravity engine, they found that several filings had been sealed, and others had vanished entirely from public archives. Only partial schematics remained in the possession of those who had attended the early demonstrations. These diagrams revealed intricate coil geometries and complex timing circuits but lacked the precise chemical formulation of the ferrofluid, the key component that allowed the engine to function. Without it, replication proved impossible. The ferrofluid gravity engine entered historical obscurity, remembered only by a small group of engineers who witnessed its unusual behavior. The notion that a rotating magnetic lattice and structured ferrofluid could influence gravitational properties continued to circulate among fringe physics communities, but no verified reconstruction ever emerged. Reinhardt himself disappeared from public records, leaving behind a device whose potential was never fully explored. Today, the story of the ferrofluid gravity engine stands as a fragment of technological history, an experiment that pushed the boundaries of material science and field manipulation, only to be quietly removed from the world. Its legacy rests in the descriptions of those brief moments when liquid motion, magnetism, and unexplained forces seemed to merge into a single, silent mechanism. The Tunguska electromagnetic pulse device. In the early 20th century, long before satellite imaging or modern forensic science, a remote region of Siberia became the site of an event that would shape decades of speculation. The Tunguska explosion of 1908 devastated vast expanses of forest, flattening millions of trees in a radial pattern. For many years, the cause was attributed to a celestial object, yet internal reports from a group of Russian experimental researchers suggested a different possibility. According to their preserved notes, the event might have been linked to a classified technological prototype known later as the Tunguska electromagnetic pulse device. The origins of this device trace back to an isolated research station operating under the oversight of engineers who studied atmospheric electricity and large-scale energy discharges. Their interest centered on creating a controlled electromagnetic pulse capable of transferring energy through the atmosphere with minimal loss. The device they constructed consisted of a towering metal array, anchored deep into the permafrost, supported by a grid of copper conductors that extended outward in geometric formation. At its heart was a resonant coil system designed to accumulate electrical charge from naturally occurring atmospheric gradients. The internal principle was based on rapid energy release. By synchronizing a series of capacitors and inductive loops, the device was intended to discharge a concentrated pulse that would travel through the air, interacting with the ionosphere and returning to the surface at a designated point. The engineers believed that such a pulse could illuminate the night sky, power remote stations, or influence weather patterns. Early reports described the array behaving unusually during testing, producing silent flashes, oscillating electrical fields, and disturbances detected by distant telegraph lines. In 1908, the device was activated during a period of increased atmospheric instability. Observers noted a sharp rise in electrical activity surrounding the array, followed by a sudden spike in the instrument readings. Moments later, a column of bright blue light rose above the forest canopy, recorded by workers at outlying stations. The ground trembled, and a resonant hum spread through the surrounding landscape. Then, without warning, a massive discharge occurred. The pulse surged upward into the sky and traveled across the atmosphere before collapsing in a violent burst near the Tunguska River basin. The resulting shockwave devastated the region, flattening trees in a pattern consistent with a powerful atmospheric detonation. The research station itself suffered structural damage, and several instruments were rendered unusable due to electromagnetic interference. Reports written in the weeks following the incident described widespread magnetic anomalies, compass failures, and lingering electrical disturbances across hundreds of kilometers. When officials arrived at the site, the researchers were instructed to halt all activity. The array was dismantled, and all components capable of storing or discharging energy were removed. Technicians cataloged surviving documents, many of which were later sealed under military classification. The event was officially attributed to a meteor, and references to the device were omitted from public archives. Diaries, technical logs, and correspondence detailing the project circulated only within a narrow scientific network before disappearing entirely. Despite the suppression, remnants of the station's infrastructure remained visible for decades. Metal supports partially embedded in the soil, fragments of insulated wiring, and collapsed foundations hinted at a structure far more complex than typical regional facilities. Local accounts described unusual behavior in animals, persistent electrical storms, and areas where compasses refused to stabilize long after the event. Later examinations of the region found no fragments of a meteor, no crater, and no traces of conventional explosives. The radial treefall pattern suggested a high-altitude energy release rather than an impact. Researchers who revisited the idea of an artificial cause noted that the characteristics of the destruction aligned with what might result from a large-scale electromagnetic pulse interacting with atmospheric layers. The Tunguska electromagnetic pulse device, though never officially recognized, became a subject of quiet discussion among physicists studying high-energy atmospheric phenomena. Some argued that the technology had been decades ahead of its time, relying on principles that would only later be partly explored in ionospheric research and resonant field experiments. Others believed the device had reached its operational threshold unexpectedly, leading to a runaway discharge that unleashed the stored energy across the sky. No physical traces of the apparatus survived the passage of years. The permafrost reclaimed the ground, and vegetation grew over the collapsed remains. What persisted were sparse notes, partial diagrams, and testimony from those who witnessed the event's aftermath. These fragments form the only record of a device that may have produced one of the most powerful non-nuclear explosions in history. Today, the story of the Tunguska electromagnetic pulse device remains intertwined with the mystery of the Siberian blast. It stands as a reminder of early experiments in atmospheric energy manipulation, experiments whose consequences reached far beyond the expectations of their creators, and whose legacy endured only through faint traces left in damaged instruments and long-forgotten research journals. The Hendershot anti-gravity drum. In the early 1930s, American inventor Lester Hendershot presented a device that drew immediate attention from both engineers and military observers. Known later as the Hendershot anti-gravity drum, it appeared at first glance to be a simple mechanical assembly. A cylindrical frame wrapped with coils of copper wire, surrounded by a series of tuned resonators and magnetic elements. Despite its modest size, the device reportedly produced motion without any visible source of propulsion. The core of the drum consisted of two opposing magnetic fields arranged in a configuration Hendershot described as self-resonant. Each field was connected to a set of coils wound around the cylindrical body, forming a closed loop that behaved less like a traditional motor and more like a dynamically tuned oscillator. When powered by a small initial current, the mechanism began to vibrate softly, causing the coils to generate a rhythmic electromagnetic pattern. During demonstrations, the device exhibited an unusual behavior. Once the oscillation reached a specific frequency, the drum lifted slightly from its support frame, hovering for brief moments before settling back down. Instruments placed near the device recorded fluctuations in local magnetic strength, as well as subtle changes in weight distribution on the measuring scale beneath it. The effect was delicate but repeatable, suggesting that the drum interacted with its environment through more than simple magnetic repulsion. Hendershot believed that the key to the device's behavior lay in resonance. The oscillating fields created a pattern that, according to his notes, could interact with the Earth's natural magnetic lines. By tuning the coils and adjusting the resonators, he claimed he could modulate the internal energy flow to reduce the drum's effective weight. Observers found that certain configurations caused the rotating magnetic patterns to stabilize into a coherent rhythm, making the device unusually quiet and steady during operation. Interest in the invention grew rapidly. Representatives from both private industry and government agencies approached Hendershot, requesting further demonstrations and access to his technical notes. Their evaluations confirmed that the drum did not rely on compressed air, hidden wiring, or any form of mechanical thrust. The magnetic oscillations were the only active components, yet the device displayed brief episodes of levitation and directional movement. As attention increased, so did pressure on Hendershot. He was urged to refine the design, improve its stability, and prepare a larger version for advanced testing. During this period, he began documenting the internal geometry of the coils more meticulously, noting that even small deviations in the winding pattern disrupted the device's performance. The resonators had to be aligned with extreme precision, and the magnetic cores required specific alloys to maintain the necessary field behavior. Then, without public explanation, the project was abruptly halted. Those close to Hendershot noticed a sudden shift in his demeanor. He became cautious about discussing the device and avoided further demonstrations. Rumors circulated that the prototype had been taken for evaluation by officials who deemed the technology sensitive. Shortly afterward, Hendershot relocated, and the workshop where he had constructed and tested the drum was emptied of equipment. Attempts to reproduce the anti-gravity drum in later years were unsuccessful. Researchers who attempted to replicate the coil geometry found that the diagrams available in public archives were incomplete. Some pages of Hendershot's notebooks had been removed, and references to specific materials had been redacted in copies released to engineering groups. Without these details, the device's unique oscillation pattern could not be reproduced. A small number of surviving witnesses described the drum's behavior consistently. A quiet hum, a shift in weight, and momentary levitation that seemed too controlled to be the result of conventional magnetism. These testimonies formed the primary basis for reconstructing its history after the original prototypes disappeared. As time passed, the Hendershot anti-gravity drum became a subject of speculation among researchers interested in alternative propulsion and field effects. Some believed that the device had exploited a subtle interaction between magnetic resonance and inertial forces, an interaction that conventional engineering had not yet explored. Others viewed it as an early experiment in dynamic field manipulation, a technique that would only begin to appear in theoretical physics decades later. No definitive explanation for the device's disappearance has ever been provided. Its absence from technical archives, combined with the unusual gaps in Hendershot's surviving notes, led many to believe that the invention had been suppressed. Whether due to concerns about its potential applications or the instability of the underlying mechanism, the anti-gravity drum remained hidden from further study. Today, only partial diagrams and scattered accounts remain, preserving the memory of a cylindrical device that briefly defied gravity through oscillating magnetic fields. The Hendershot anti-gravity drum stands as another example of an invention that emerged for a brief moment, demonstrated effects beyond its time, and was quietly removed from view, leaving behind a legacy defined by its absence as much as by its fleeting demonstrations. The Baikal plasma sphere. Lake Baikal has always carried an air of quiet mystery. Its waters are deeper than any other on Earth, and its isolated ecosystems have produced forms of life found nowhere else. In the early 1970s, this remoteness and stability attracted a small Soviet research group tasked with studying high-energy atmospheric interactions above large bodies of water. Their instruments captured something unexpected: a repeating formation of luminous, perfectly spherical plasma structures hovering above the lake's central basin. These objects appeared at precise intervals, always in the same region, each maintaining a stable configuration for several minutes before dispersing. The phenomenon was first logged as a natural plasma anomaly. Yet one detail challenged that classification. The spheres emitted extremely narrowband electromagnetic signatures, too controlled and too consistent to be random. One physicist on the team, Dr. Pavel Arkanov, proposed that they were interacting with the geomagnetic field in a highly engineered way, creating a form of contained, self-stabilizing plasma envelope. He noted that the spheres behaved like artificially tuned resonant cavities, adjusting their intensity in response to changes in the local magnetic environment. His report circulated briefly within a classified research division before being restricted under a higher security directive. A year later, the same team was reassigned to a new facility near Severodvinsk, where they were instructed to replicate the plasma formations under controlled laboratory conditions. The project was given an internal name translated as the Baikal Plasma Sphere Initiative. The group constructed a chamber equipped with magnetic coils designed to shape plasma into stable structures using a rotating tri-field configuration. According to later fragments of documentation, they succeeded in generating small plasma nodes that remained coherent for several seconds. What distinguished these nodes from normal experimental plasma was their ability to retain shape without expanding outward. Notes from the period describe them as self-compressing, as though the energy inside maintained equilibrium without external pressure. The program advanced quickly. Engineers attempted to scale the effect by altering the chamber's geometry, adjusting the angular frequency of the magnetic fields, and injecting trace amounts of ionized metals into the plasma flow. The resulting structures began to mimic the natural Baikal spheres more closely. Some documents claim that the scaled prototypes produced a measurable reduction in local gravitational mass. Researchers interpreted this as an interaction between plasma stability and the curvature of space at extremely small scales. The experiments were halted several times due to equipment stress and unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations that interfered with nearby systems. In the mid-1970s, a classified assessment concluded that the Baikal spheres, both natural and reproduced, could represent a form of directed energy containment. Theoretical models suggested potential applications ranging from propulsion to atmospheric manipulation. The project entered its most ambitious stage, aiming to generate a full-scale plasma sphere capable of independent stability outside laboratory confinement. Reports from this period become increasingly fragmented. One surviving memo references a test where a sphere expanded to nearly half a meter, rose toward the ceiling, and dissipated with a sharp electromagnetic discharge that disabled monitoring equipment. The memo also notes that the sphere produced a faint, audible resonance during its ascent. Shortly thereafter, the initiative was abruptly cancelled. Equipment was dismantled, funding records were erased, and the research group was reassigned. Some members were instructed to sign non-disclosure agreements that barred them from discussing plasma resonance technologies. Lake Baikal continued to produce sporadic sightings of luminous spheres, but official explanations categorized them as atmospheric plasma events or visual distortions. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, fragments of the original Baikal plasma sphere documents surfaced in private archives. The papers describe a technology that could theoretically stabilize plasma in open air, sustain its shape through magnetic self-regulation, and possibly influence its own inertial mass. No complete design survived, and attempts to replicate the work using modern equipment have yielded only short-lived plasma forms lacking the coherence recorded in the 1970s. The Baikal plasma sphere remains an unfinished chapter of experimental physics. Whether it represented a misunderstood natural phenomenon or an early step toward controlled plasma structures is still unclear. The surviving records depict a technology at the edge of stability, emerging briefly in the quiet expanse of the world's deepest lake before being withdrawn into obscurity. The German sound cannon A-12. The development of the A-12 began in the final years of the Second World War, when German engineers were searching for unconventional technologies that could create large effects with minimal resources. Among these experiments was a program dedicated to the study of acoustic pressure waves and their potential use as directed energy. The premise centered on a simple physical principle. Sound, when amplified and focused with precision, can exert mechanical force. The challenge was to generate this force at a scale far beyond natural limits. The A-12 project was organized in a secluded facility in the Black Forest, where researchers constructed a long experimental hall lined with acoustic insulation panels. At its center stood the first prototype, a dual-chamber oscillation unit capable of producing synchronized low-frequency pulses. These pulses were amplified through a series of parabolic reflectors designed to compress the acoustic waves into a narrow beam. According to preserved laboratory notes, the earliest tests showed that the beam could displace small suspended objects, indicating that the pressure gradient was strong enough to cause controlled mechanical motion. The engineers refined the apparatus by adding a resonance canal, a cylindrical tube fitted with metallic diaphragms that vibrated at precise intervals. Each diaphragm amplified the previous pulse, creating a cascading effect that significantly increased the energy density of the outgoing sound wave. This design caused a distinctive oscillation pattern in the air, described in the records as a pulsing pressure column. When the beam was activated, observers noted that dust particles aligned themselves along its axis, revealing the path of the compressed airstream. A major advancement occurred when the team discovered that certain frequencies, especially those in the infrasonic range, produced a measurable physiological effect. Muscles reacted involuntarily, and the air in the room carried a heavy vibration that resonated through the chest cavity. Engineers recognized that this resonance could be shaped into a directional field. They modified the reflectors to sharpen the beam, narrowing its width while lengthening its effective range. The refined A-12 prototype was large, occupying nearly the entire experimental hall, but its output grew increasingly stable. One internal document describes a controlled test carried out on a grid of wooden panels placed at varying distances. When the A-12 fired a short pulse sequence, the closest panels fractured along radial lines. Panels further away showed signs of compression stress but remained intact. The pattern demonstrated the system's gradient and confirmed that the power of the beam decreased smoothly with distance, suggesting the technology was predictable enough for practical calibration. By late development, the A-12 project entered a classified stage. Engineers attempted to integrate the device into a movable frame, constructing a reinforced platform with rotating mounts that allowed the resonance canal to be aimed with precision. They conducted outdoor trials in a remote valley, where the sound cannon produced long, deep pulses that traveled through the air with a low, almost imperceptible hum. Observers recorded disturbed soil patterns and vibrations, extending several meters beyond the impact zone. The data indicated that the A-12 could generate a focused field of acoustic pressure capable of disrupting structures without visible projectiles. Despite these advancements, the program faced significant challenges. The cooling system struggled to manage the heat generated by prolonged oscillation, and the metallic diaphragms degraded under continuous stress. Reports mention unexpected harmonic feedback loops that destabilized the entire device, forcing shutdowns. Some tests resulted in uncontrolled vibration surges that damaged internal components. As the war neared its end, the facility was evacuated, and many documents were destroyed. The A-12 platform was partially dismantled, and remaining fragments were removed by the retreating team. After the conflict, scattered references to the sound cannon appeared in classified engineering summaries, describing it as a directional acoustic apparatus with destructive potential, but limited operational reliability. No confirmed physical remnants of the device were ever recovered. The story of the A-12 survives primarily through technical notes and reconstructed accounts. They depict a machine that stood at the intersection of physics and experimental engineering, a device that attempted to shape sound into a concentrated force. Its development ended abruptly, leaving behind only the outline of a technology that may have briefly reached the threshold of practical application before vanishing into post-war secrecy. The Plasmic Fusion Torch. The concept of the Plasmic Fusion Torch emerged during a short period of intensive experimental research in the early 1960s, when several laboratories began exploring the interaction between high-temperature plasma streams and controlled magnetic confinement. The device was conceived as a compact apparatus capable of generating a column of superheated plasma dense enough to initiate low-level fusion events. According to surviving laboratory notes, the torch was designed not as a weapon, but as a tool for material processing, allowing matter to be broken down into its fundamental components through extreme thermal and electromagnetic exposure. The prototype consisted of a cylindrical chamber lined with a heat-resistant alloy developed specifically for high-energy plasma applications. At the chamber's center was a magneto-constriction coil, a tightly wound assembly capable of shaping the flow of charged particles into a narrow column. When powered, the coil generated a rotating magnetic field that compressed the plasma, increasing its temperature and density. The chamber was fed by a small fuel mixture, most often hydrogen isotopes, that became ionized almost instantly when exposed to the electric arc initiating the reaction. During the first series of tests, engineers observed that the plasma column exhibited a stable core region surrounded by a turbulent halo. This halo radiated a faint bluish light, a sign that the plasma was interacting with the walls of the confinement chamber at the molecular level. The core, however, remained sharply defined, indicating that the magnetic field was strong enough to hold the plasma in place. Measurements taken with early diagnostic probes showed brief spikes in neutron output, suggesting that fusion events were occurring, albeit with low efficiency. A major breakthrough was recorded when the team introduced a pulse-driven power supply. Instead of a continuous current, the coil received rapid high-amplitude pulses that compressed the plasma rhythmically. This pulsed confinement effect increased the density of the core beyond previous limits. As a result, the neutron count rose sharply. Engineers described this phase as the moment the device transitioned from a high-temperature torch into a microfusion system. Although the fusion yield remained small, it was measurable and consistent enough to prove the concept. The next stage of development focused on directing the plasma column outward, converting the device from a sealed experimental chamber into an open-ended torch. The challenge lay in shaping the magnetic field so that the plasma could extend beyond the chamber without destabilizing. To accomplish this, the engineers introduced a magnetic nozzle comprised of two opposing electromagnets. Their fields overlapped to create a guiding path for the plasma, allowing it to exit the device while preserving the temperature gradient of the core. In outdoor trials, the plasmic fusion torch demonstrated extraordinary thermal effects. When activated, it emitted a concentrated stream of ionized matter bright enough to illuminate the surrounding area. Test materials placed in front of the beam showed rapid disintegration. Metals softened and vaporized within seconds, while complex composites fractured at the molecular level. The device did not rely solely on heat. The combination of electromagnetic pressure, particle density, and brief fusion reactions amplified its overall impact. These field tests revealed the torch's destructive capabilities, which greatly exceeded initial expectations. The team documented that even dense industrial alloys could not withstand prolonged exposure. This raised concerns about the difficulty of controlling or containing the device outside laboratory settings. The energy requirements also increased significantly as the magnetic nozzle grew stronger. Power fluctuations sometimes caused the plasma stream to widen, destabilizing the torch and forcing emergency shutdowns. Despite these challenges, the development continued until the late 1960s, when the project was abruptly terminated. Official records attribute the closure to rising costs and technical instability. However, internal correspondence indicates that the torch's potential to break down any known material caused unease among overseeing authorities. The combination of fusion-level temperatures and directed plasma made the device difficult to regulate and potentially hazardous even in strictly controlled environments. After the project ended, the prototype was disassembled, and its components were redistributed among several research facilities. Only fragments of the documentation survived: magnetic field diagrams, thermal charts, and neutron detection logs. These remnants outline a device that pushed the limits of plasma physics, briefly reaching beyond experimental plasma arcs into a domain approaching controlled fusion. The plasmic fusion torch remains one of the most elusive inventions of its era. It existed at the boundary of emerging scientific understanding, demonstrating that intense plasma streams could be shaped, directed, and used to break matter down to its elemental form. Its disappearance left behind a set of incomplete notes and a lingering sense of a technology that came close to realizing a new class of energy-based tools before being quietly erased from the historical record. The Soviet Hyperborea engine. The Hyperborea engine originated in a closed research group formed in the late 1950s within a remote Siberian institute specializing in high-altitude propulsion. The project's name appeared in internal memoranda as a code for an experimental drive meant to operate in thin atmospheric conditions, where conventional combustion engines rapidly lost efficiency. According to preserved fragments of technical notes, the device was based on a hybrid principle that combined magneto-hydrodynamic flow control with a dense plasma core, allowing it to generate thrust without relying on oxygen intake. The first prototype consisted of a reinforced cylindrical chamber built from a layered composite of titanium and heat-resistant ceramics. At its center sat an induction ring that produced a rotating electromagnetic field. Into this chamber, researchers injected a supercooled ionizable fluid that expanded rapidly when exposed to the magnetic pulse. This expansion created a circulating plasma vortex that followed the direction of the internal magnetic field lines. The vortex acted simultaneously as a propellant and an energy source, providing a controlled yet powerful thrust vector. Initial tests were conducted in an underground facility below the institute. When the induction coils activated, the chamber filled with a bluish-white glow. The plasma vortex rotated with increasing speed until it reached a stable high-energy state. Sensors placed around the chamber recorded a consistent magnetic signature, indicating that the vortex remained confined and predictable. The thrust output in this early phase was small but measurable, confirming that the hybrid propulsion principle was viable. The second stage of development shifted toward efficiency. Engineers introduced an external containment structure composed of superconducting plates. These plates generated a secondary magnetic field that interacted with the internal vortex, allowing the engine to channel its plasma more precisely. This refinement produced a smoother and more powerful thrust curve. According to test logs, the improved prototype achieved an impulse level significantly higher than experimental ion engines of the same era. The engine also demonstrated unusual thermal behavior. Despite the intense energy in the vortex core, the outer structure remained relatively cool, suggesting that the magnetic confinement effectively insulated the chamber. Field trials began in the early 1960s. The engine was mounted onto a static test rig in a secluded valley not far from the main facility. During activation, observers reported a low, steady hum and visible distortion in the air surrounding the exhaust outlet. The exhaust itself emitted minimal heat, yet the thrust force registered on the rig's sensors exceeded projections. The The plasma vortex behaved consistently even in long-duration tests, maintaining its rotational stability without rapid fuel depletion. Internal documents describe this reliability as the project's most promising feature. As development progressed, engineers attempted to integrate the Hyperborea engine into a small experimental aircraft frame. This required redesigning the induction coils to reduce weight and reshaping the superconducting plates to fit within the fuselage. One test flight was reportedly conducted at very low altitude during winter, when the valley was covered in snow. Witness logs mention a sharp vertical lift followed by a smooth forward acceleration, with almost no visible exhaust. The aircraft's motion appeared unusually quiet for its level of thrust, a characteristic attributed to the engine's reliance on magnetic flow rather than combustion. Despite these advancements, several technical challenges limited further progress. During extended operation, the plasma vortex occasionally exhibited density fluctuations that caused brief drops in thrust. Engineers attempted to stabilize these fluctuations by altering fuel composition and adjusting the pulse frequency of the induction coils, but the improvements were inconsistent. There were also concerns about the superconducting plates, which required extremely low temperatures to function properly. Maintaining such conditions in a mobile platform presented significant engineering difficulties. By the mid-1960s, the project was discontinued. Official records list a lack of sustainable funding and shifting research priorities as the main reasons for termination. However, some internal correspondence suggests that the stability issues and the high complexity of the superconducting system made the engine difficult to advance beyond the prototype stage. The aircraft frame was disassembled, and the main chamber was reportedly moved to another facility before being lost in subsequent reorganizations. Only fragmented technical diagrams, incomplete field logs, and a handful of internal summaries survived. They depict a propulsion system that operated on principles far ahead of mainstream technology of the era. A hybrid plasma vortex engine capable of producing steady thrust with minimal thermal output and no reliance on atmospheric oxygen. The Hyperborea engine remains an unusual footnote in the history of experimental propulsion, representing a moment when theoretical physics and Soviet aerospace engineering briefly converged on a device that showed promise before its abrupt disappearance from the public record. The Bio-Aether resonance generator. In the early 1970s, a team of interdisciplinary researchers in a secluded European laboratory began exploring the intersection of biological processes and electromagnetic resonance. Their goal was to create a device capable of amplifying subtle energy fields present in living systems and transforming them into coherent mechanical output. This work led to the development of what would later be referred to as the Bio-Aether resonance generator. Unlike conventional engines, the device did not rely on combustion, magnetism, or chemical reactions alone. It sought to extract energy from interactions between organic tissue and controlled etheric resonance, a theoretical field hypothesized to permeate all matter. The generator consisted of a cylindrical core surrounded by concentric rings of conductive coils, interspersed with piezoelectric membranes. Small bioreactive cells were incorporated into the system, samples of living tissue maintained in a stable nutrient medium. When the device was activated, an alternating current passed through the coils, producing a low-frequency resonance that interacted with the biocells. Researchers documented an immediate increase in electromagnetic activity in the surrounding chamber. Sensitive detectors measured oscillations that extended beyond conventional frequencies, forming a complex harmonic structure. Observations indicated that the generator produced two primary effects. First, a subtle force appeared to emanate from the device, measurable with precision scales but imperceptible to the naked eye. This force could influence small objects suspended nearby, causing them to shift directionally in sync with the resonance cycles. Second, the biocells within the chamber showed accelerated metabolic activity and unusual alignment along the magnetic field lines. Lab notes describe the phenomenon as a coherent energy exchange between biological matter and the structured field generated by the device. Over successive trials, the team refined the system by adjusting coil geometry and resonance timing. They discovered that the interplay between multiple harmonic frequencies created a stabilization effect, allowing the generator to maintain a steady energy output over extended periods. In one series of experiments, A small suspended rotor inside the chamber began to rotate without direct mechanical connection, demonstrating the conversion of the subtle resonance field into usable kinetic energy. The rotation was gradual but persistent, providing clear evidence that the device could transform the interaction of organic energy and etheric resonance into mechanical work. The team documented further enhancements involving feedback loops. Sensors embedded near the biocells monitored oscillation amplitude, and this data was fed back into the current driving the coils. This self-regulating system increased efficiency, producing stronger, more consistent forces. According to surviving notes, the maximum measured output was sufficient to influence objects up to several kilograms, though scaling beyond this point remained experimental and untested. Despite the promise, the project faced inherent limitations. The biocells were sensitive to environmental conditions, and any deviation in temperature, humidity, or nutrient supply disrupted the resonance pattern. Maintaining precise synchronization of harmonic frequencies also proved technically demanding. Internal correspondence suggests that several prototypes experienced sudden resonance collapse, which temporarily damaged the electronic control systems. Such instability made extended operation risky, limiting practical experimentation. By the late 1970s, the Bio-Aether resonance generator had achieved a degree of maturity, yet the project was abruptly terminated. Surviving accounts hint that oversight authorities deemed the technology sensitive, possibly due to its potential applications in remote propulsion, energy generation, or biological influence. The prototypes were dismantled, lab records were partially classified, and most documentation was removed from circulation. Only fragments of schematics, laboratory logs, and third-party notes survived, scattered across private archives and classified repositories. The surviving material presents a detailed outline of the generator's construction: concentric electromagnetic coils, piezoelectric membranes, biocell chambers, and harmonic feedback loops. These records describe a system capable of converting the subtle interactions between biological matter and a theorized ether field into measurable mechanical force. The mechanism remains unreplicated, and no modern equivalent has fully captured its reported effects. The Bio-Aether resonance generator represents a rare instance in experimental science where biology, theoretical fields, and precise electromagnetic engineering intersected. Its disappearance ensured that the principles observed in the original experiments remained unexplored, leaving only fragments of technical knowledge and the memory of a device that once converted living energy into directed mechanical motion. Its legacy endures as a reminder of the brief era when human ingenuity reached into the unseen interplay of matter, energy, and life itself. The ancient Vimana Mercury Vortex engine. Accounts of the Vimana in ancient Sanskrit texts describe flying vehicles of extraordinary speed and maneuverability, though the technical mechanisms behind them have remained mysterious for centuries. In the mid-20th century, researchers studying these descriptions hypothesized that they might reflect a real technology, a principle later reconstructed in modern experimental terms as the ancient Vimana Mercury Vortex engine. The device was said to operate by channeling mercury, a conductive fluid, through precisely shaped vortices under the influence of electromagnetic fields. The rotation of the liquid in combination with these fields allegedly produced lift, propulsion, and control without conventional wings or engines. The reconstructed engine consisted of a spherical or cylindrical central chamber containing mercury at carefully controlled temperature and purity. Surrounding the chamber were concentric copper coils, configured to generate a rotating magnetic field. When the field was applied, the mercury began to form a highly stable vortex. Observers reported that this vortex exhibited unusual behavior. It rotated with apparent independence from the chamber walls, maintaining a coherent structure even under sudden adjustments to the magnetic field. The combination of centrifugal forces and electromagnetic rotation was believed to create localized distortions in gravity, reducing the effective weight of the device. A key element of the engine was resonance. The magnetic coils were tuned to specific frequencies, which allowed the mercury to oscillate in harmonic patterns. These oscillations were not random. They were designed to match theoretical resonant frequencies of the Earth's gravitational field, producing directional lift and stability. Instrument logs from experimental reconstructions indicated that even small adjustments in frequency could dramatically alter the thrust vector, suggesting a highly sensitive but controllable method of propulsion. Tests of the principle on small-scale prototypes revealed remarkable effects. When the vortex was active, a test platform experienced a measurable decrease in weight. Sensors recorded fluctuations in local gravitational readings, and small suspended objects nearby vibrated subtly in response to the fields. The Mercury vortex itself remained contained, showing no leakage or loss of coherence, even during prolonged operation. Researchers noted that the system produced no combustion, no heat signature beyond minor resistive losses, and no audible noise beyond the hum of the coils. Attempts to scale the engine for larger applications introduced new challenges. Maintaining the stability of a larger Mercury vortex required increasingly precise electromagnetic fields, and any irregularity could cause turbulence that destabilized the system. Safety was a constant concern, as mercury is highly toxic and small spills could contaminate experimental chambers. Despite these obstacles, several functional prototypes were built, demonstrating sustained lift and directional control sufficient to support a small, enclosed platform. Historical and technical fragments suggest that the principles underlying the Mercury vortex engine may have influenced other experimental propulsion efforts. The concept of rotating conductive fluids producing localized gravitational effects appeared in scattered engineering notes, particularly within aerospace research exploring alternative methods of lift and thrust. Yet the original designs were never fully preserved. Most detailed schematics, operating instructions, and laboratory logs were lost, removed, or classified shortly after initial reconstruction attempts. The disappearance of the prototypes and documentation ensured that the ancient Vimana Mercury vortex engine remained largely theoretical. Only partial diagrams, experimental notes, and anecdotal reports survived, describing a technology that combined fluid dynamics, electromagnetic resonance, and gravitational manipulation. Researchers studying these remnants emphasized that the observed effects, reduction in weight, controlled lift, and vortex coherence, were consistent with the principles outlined in the original Vimana texts, though modern verification remained incomplete. Today, the Mercury vortex engine occupies a unique position in the history of forbidden inventions. It represents an intersection between ancient descriptions and modern experimental physics, a device capable of generating lift and propulsion through controlled Mercury vortices influenced by magnetic resonance. Its disappearance from practical study has preserved it as a concept rather than a fully realized machine, leaving behind only the echoes of its potential and the faint traces of a technology that may have existed far earlier than conventional science once assumed. The subquantum oscillator of Dr. Hartmann. In the early 1960s, Dr. Heinrich Hartmann, a physicist working in a secluded research institute in Western Germany, began exploring phenomena that appeared to operate beneath the conventional quantum scale. His investigations centered on the possibility of manipulating energy at a subquantum level, interactions occurring at a scale smaller than electrons or protons, in domains only hinted at by theoretical physics. The culmination of this work became known as the subquantum oscillator, a device intended to generate and control energy fluctuations below the threshold of observable quantum events. The oscillator itself was deceptively simple in appearance. It consisted of a cylindrical chamber surrounded by nested coils of superconductive wire. Inside the chamber, Dr. Hartmann suspended a lattice of highly refined crystalline structures, each aligned with extreme precision. The chamber was evacuated to near-perfect vacuum conditions, eliminating any conventional interference. Once energized, the superconducting coils produced rapidly alternating electromagnetic fields, causing the crystal lattice to vibrate at frequencies that, according to Hartmann's notes, resonated with the subquantum field, a hypothetical energy domain underlying all matter. Initial tests revealed extraordinary behavior. Instruments placed around the oscillator recorded fluctuations in mass and energy readings that could not be explained by conventional physics. Small test masses suspended above the device exhibited minute oscillations, as though responding to unseen forces. Hartmann described these movements as resonant nudges of subatomic reality, indicating that the oscillator had successfully interacted with the domain of energy beneath the normal quantum scale. As experiments progressed, Hartmann refined the frequency modulation of the superconducting coils. By adjusting the phase and amplitude of each coil individually, he was able to generate stable subquantum waves that persisted for extended periods. These waves produced measurable effects on the surrounding environment. Delicate objects on nearby tables shifted slightly, sensitive electromagnetic detectors displayed synchronized oscillations, and local gravitational readings fluctuated within a small but consistent range. The oscillator appeared capable of influencing inertial properties of objects in a controlled manner. The most remarkable phase of the research came when Hartmann constructed a larger prototype, increasing the chamber's diameter and the number of nested coils. In this version, subquantum oscillations became visible as faint luminescent patterns within the evacuated chamber. The crystalline lattice glowed subtly as the fields interacted with it, and sensors indicated a significant amplification of subquantum energy. Tests with this prototype suggested that, if scaled further, the device could theoretically produce enough force to influence larger masses or even interact with gravitational fields over short distances. Despite these promising results, the subquantum oscillator presented extreme technical challenges. The vacuum chamber had to be maintained at a stability unmatched by any other experiment of the period. The superconductive coils required temperatures approaching absolute zero, and even slight variations in alignment disrupted the subquantum resonance. Additionally, prolonged operation produced unpredictable side effects, including spontaneous electromagnetic pulses and rapid, unexplained fluctuations in the oscillator's output. By the late 1960s, the project drew attention from higher authorities due to its potential applications. Dr. Hartmann was instructed to halt public demonstrations, and access to the laboratory was strictly controlled. Within months, the largest prototype was dismantled, most of the documentation was classified, and references to the oscillator vanished from official records. Fragments of Hartmann's notebooks survived in private collections, describing coil configurations, crystal lattice geometries, and experimental observations, but critical operational details were missing. Modern researchers studying the remnants of Hartmann's work emphasized the unusual coherence and stability of the observed effects. The device seemed to tap into a layer of physical reality that conventional instruments could only partially measure, producing controlled energy and force fluctuations beneath the quantum scale. No replication has succeeded to date, as the precise combination of superconductive fields, crystal lattices, and vacuum conditions remains elusive. The subquantum oscillator of Dr. Hartmann stands as a testament to experimental ambition at the edge of scientific understanding. It represents an attempt to access and manipulate forces that lie beneath conventional quantum mechanics, producing measurable interactions with mass and energy without any standard mechanism of propulsion or power. Its disappearance from the historical record preserved it as a tantalizing mystery. A device whose brief existence suggested possibilities beyond contemporary physics, leaving only partial records and the faint memory of an invention erased from time. The zero-point lens device. In the late 1960s, a group of physicists working in a remote laboratory in Switzerland began exploring the concept of extracting usable energy from the vacuum of space itself. Their research focused on the theoretical zero-point field, a fluctuating quantum background that exists even in a perfect vacuum. The culmination of their work became known as the zero-point lens device, a mechanism designed to focus and concentrate zero-point energy into a controllable form. Unlike conventional engines or energy sources, the device did not consume fuel, chemical, or nuclear. It aimed to harness the subtle, omnipresent fluctuations of the vacuum itself. The core of the device was a series of concentric dielectric lenses made from ultrapure crystalline materials. These lenses were arranged within a spherical frame, aligned with extreme precision along multiple axes. Surrounding the lens assembly were superconductive coils, connected to an oscillator system capable of generating rapidly alternating electromagnetic fields. According to surviving laboratory notes, the combination of the lenses and oscillating fields created regions of enhanced vacuum fluctuation, effectively concentrating zero-point energy into localized points within the device. During initial tests, researchers observed anomalous energy spikes that could not be attributed to any known phenomenon. Sensitive calorimeters recorded bursts of energy that appeared to originate from within the vacuum itself. Small metallic weights suspended near the focal points exhibited minute, directional forces, suggesting that the device could convert zero-point fluctuations into mechanical motion. Observers described a faint shimmering effect within the lens assembly, as though the boundaries of the material were subtly interacting with the underlying quantum field. Refinements to the design focused on phase synchronization of the oscillators. By adjusting timing and amplitude with microsecond precision, the researchers were able to stabilize the energy output, producing a coherent and continuous force. Laboratory logs indicate that the device could lift small objects without any conventional mechanical or magnetic interaction. Over successive trials, the zero-point lens device demonstrated the ability to produce measurable energy flux sufficient to power minor electrical systems in a controlled experimental setup. One of the most remarkable aspects of the device was its lack of conventional waste. No heat, radiation, or chemical byproducts were detected beyond minimal resistive losses in the superconducting circuits. The concentrated energy appeared to emerge directly from the vacuum, shaped and guided by the crystalline lenses and electromagnetic field configuration. Observers noted subtle perturbations in local gravity and electromagnetic fields near the device, consistent with a real, physical extraction of energy from the surrounding environment. Despite the apparent success, the zero-point lens device faced significant technical limitations. The superconductive coils required extreme cryogenic temperatures, and the crystalline lenses had to maintain near-perfect purity and alignment. Any minor deviation could destabilize the focused zero-point fluctuations, causing rapid energy collapse or unpredictable directional forces. Laboratory notes describe emergency shutdowns during early tests, when uncontrolled pulses caused mechanical vibrations and electromagnetic disturbances in nearby instruments. By the early 1970s, the project was abruptly halted. According to internal correspondence, concerns over the device's potential applications and the difficulty of safely scaling it contributed to the termination. The lens assemblies and oscillator circuits were dismantled, and much of the technical documentation was classified or destroyed. Only partial schematics, experimental logs, and observer notes survived, scattered among private collections and restricted archives. Modern assessments of the zero-point lens device emphasize its conceptual brilliance. The approach, focusing vacuum fluctuations through precise lensing and electromagnetic resonance, remains unreplicated, though it continues to influence theoretical research in zero-point energy and advanced propulsion. The surviving fragments suggest a machine capable of converting the ambient energy of empty space into directed mechanical or electrical output, a possibility far ahead of the contemporary technology of its time. The zero-point lens device endures as an example of a forbidden invention lost to history. It represents a brief moment when scientific ambition reached beyond the boundaries of observable energy, attempting to harness the most subtle forces in the universe. Its disappearance preserved only fragments and conjecture, leaving behind the impression of a device that may have transformed our understanding of energy, had it survived intact. The Magneto-Acoustic Levitation Platform. In the early 1980s, a research team working under a classified European aerospace program sought to explore unconventional methods of lift and stabilization. Their objective was to combine magnetic fields and acoustic resonance to create a platform capable of sustained levitation. This effort culminated in the Magneto-Acoustic Levitation Platform, a device designed to suspend objects without mechanical support or conventional propulsion, relying instead on the precise interaction between oscillating electromagnetic and sonic fields. The platform consisted of a rigid circular base, embedded with arrays of high-strength electromagnets arranged in alternating polarity patterns. Above and around these magnets were transducers capable of producing ultrasonic and infrasonic waves, synchronized to form standing wave patterns across the levitation zone. The central idea was that the combined magnetic and acoustic fields could create nodes of high stability, effectively reducing gravitational influence on objects placed within the platform's field. Initial tests began with small, non-conductive test masses. When the platform was activated, observers noted a subtle lifting effect. Objects initially resting on the surface began to float several centimeters above the base. The levitation was smooth and stable, with no lateral drift, indicating that the interaction between magnetic gradients and acoustic nodes produced a controlled field capable of supporting weight. Instrumentation measured both electromagnetic flux density and acoustic amplitude, confirming that the forces were additive and coherent, rather than random or spurious. Over successive experiments, The team refined the system by adjusting the phase relationships of the acoustic transducers and the timing of the magnetic field pulses. They discovered that minute shifts in phase could dramatically alter the stability of levitation. Certain configurations produced a constant hover with almost imperceptible vibration, while others induced oscillatory motion that could be harnessed for directional control. These findings suggested that the platform could, in theory, not only levitate but also translate or rotate objects by modulating field parameters. A significant advancement occurred when the engineers introduced a feedback loop linking the levitated object's position to adjustments in field intensity. Sensors detected any deviation in height or orientation and immediately adjusted the electromagnetic and acoustic outputs to maintain equilibrium. The result was a dynamically stabilized platform capable of supporting heavier loads than initial tests had allowed. Laboratory logs indicate that by the later stages of experimentation, the platform could suspend objects approaching several hundred kilograms under controlled conditions. During testing, researchers noted an unexpected phenomenon. The levitated objects exhibited reduced apparent weight, measurable on high-precision scales. This effect suggested that the combination of acoustic and magnetic fields interacted with the object's inertial properties, though the precise mechanism remained unexplained. Documentation from this period described it as a coherent levitational envelope, a term indicating that the system produced a holistic field effect rather than isolated points of lift. Despite these successes, the platform faced practical challenges. The electromagnetic arrays required significant power, while the acoustic transducers had to maintain precise frequency and amplitude stability. Minor deviations could cause the object to oscillate uncontrollably, risking damage to both the device and the test mass. Additionally, the system was highly sensitive to environmental conditions. Temperature variations, humidity, and air density could subtly alter the levitation field, requiring constant adjustment. By the mid-1980s, the Magneto-Acoustic levitation platform project was abruptly terminated. Internal memos suggest that concerns about the technology's military potential, combined with the difficulty of safe operation, led authorities to discontinue further development. The equipment was dismantled, and detailed engineering records were removed from archives. Only partial schematics, test logs, and third-party observer accounts survived, leaving behind a fragmented understanding of the platform's true capabilities. Modern evaluations highlight the platform's conceptual significance. It demonstrated that carefully tuned interactions between electromagnetic fields and acoustic waves could produce controlled levitation, suggesting possibilities for propulsion, material handling, and gravitational manipulation. No contemporary replication has achieved the full effects described in the original experiments. The Magneto-Acoustic levitation platform stands as a rare instance of advanced experimental engineering that merged physics and acoustics to defy conventional expectations of lift. Its disappearance preserved it as a lost technology, remembered only through incomplete records, observer testimonies, and the legacy of a device that briefly demonstrated controlled, fuel-free levitation at a scale never publicly achieved. Ending. Thank you for watching this journey through the most extraordinary forbidden inventions lost to history. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing your ideas and theories. And if you found this story intriguing, share the video so others can explore these hidden technologies too.